Just being real. All right, people online, I'm going to share my screen in just a second, and I'll just need someone to admit that they can see it. Hold on. All right, Zoomers, can one of y'all see just let me know you can see my screen, please? One of y'all
Yes, yes.
Awesome, awesome. All right, so we're gonna really go top to bottom, guys. The way I teach, stop me if you have a question. Don't wait till the end.
Something happened to the audio on Zoom. I don't know if y'all can hear me, but
Yeah, I can hear you. His screen is frozen on my side.
Yeah, his screen is frozen. We can hear everyone else though.
I just sent him a text.
Let me go down there and give him a shout.
Okay, I sent him a text message.
Oh. Can you all hear me on Zoom? Yeah, we can. All right, cool. I don't know what happened there, guys. It dropped. It is what it is. So I'm going to broadcast my screen. And then start the recording. It says it's recording. Sweet. All right. So going on back. So yeah, when we talk about a buyer, is it the buyer of this house, that house, who knows? That's why the B is capitalized and it's in big, bold letters, right? So when we put the buyer in there, we put Will Story or whatever that is. Now, from now on, we don't have to say buyer, Will Story. We can just say buyer, and it's a defined term. Same thing with seller. Same thing with the property, right? So later, if in an additional provision or something I refer to the property, it's this one. But keep in mind, you have to do a capital P for property, or a capital B for buyer, or capital S for seller. Otherwise, we don't know what seller, what property it is. So that's what this is doing right here, is basically saying the who, what, where of what we're doing, right? That's the big part in there. Now, I always stop on this one. We look at the 3 different types of tenancy. Y'all, can anyone tell me what the other would be? Severalty, right? So in severalty, that is when one person's buying the house. You can put what all, yeah, you put all that. Now, the reality is, just so y'all know, if you have a single buyer, right, just an individual buying, or an LLC, right, that's one entity. If you have something like that, you actually didn't have to put in severalty. You could just leave it blank. So it defaults to in severalty. I can tell you, I still put in severalty because I was countered not that long ago. They said, well, what's the tenancy? I'm like, it's obvious. It's in severalty if there's nothing checked, but I don't like counters. So I actually put in severalty there. Now, joint tenancy, all that's going to be where there's no division of ownership, not like one person owns 50, the others at 50 or 40 and 60, anything like that. We generally see that for is a married couple, they buy a house. And then if one of them dies, the other one automatically gets, it's called right of survivorship. They get the rest of the house. Now, tenants in common, when we more commonly see that, is investments, right? Like I bought a rental with a friend of mine not that long ago. If I were to die, I don't want my half just to go to him and his family. I want it to go to my family, right? So with tenants in common, we can say, is it 50-50, 60-40? How are you going to vest, right? The other time I see tenants in common is when you have like maybe like a second or third marriage. They already had assets when they went into that marriage. And so with that, they're more delineating their finances, right? Maybe their kids are grown, stuff like that. That's when I see tenants in common mostly. So do you guys have any questions about the 3 types of tenancy? Joint tenants, generally married couples, and you have right of survivorship. The nice thing is, if like your spouse dies, you don't have to go through probate. Probate's not cheap and it's not fun, right? So it just automatically goes over. So that's why you generally almost always see with married couples. I've also seen it when like a dad is buying a house for a kid and he's like, when I die, the kid gets it. Then it makes sense as well. So going on down, guys, inclusions, right?
Question.
Yeah, what's your question?
For tenants in common, where do you say how much each?
So the question is, in tenants in common, where do you delineate ownership and all that? That'll be done through the title company. So you don't put that into the contract. You don't put 50-50, 40-60, or whatever that looks like. The title company will facilitate with that. Okay, cool. All right, y'all, for inclusions, right? So I got so many notes on this. Just want to make sure I'm not missing something. One thing actually up here, y'all, keep in mind, mailing addresses do not transfer ownership. It's the legal description. You can pull it from Realist. It's not always right. If you want the most accurate legal description, best practice is to go onto county records and pull it from there. Do whatever you want. I can tell you, I've always pulled from Realist. I've never had an issue, and I've sold a few houses, but I do know best practice is from county records. Section 2.5, y'all, there's a lot of stuff that is automatically included in the house. I'm not going to read this list, right? But all of these things are automatically included. These are like attached items, right? And then down 2.5.2, look at all these other things that are included. So like when your client's like, well, I really want the window coverings, you don't have to write it in. It's in there unless it's excluded, right? Now you could write it in there if you wanted for, I don't know, for whatever reason. But even if like you see a house and has a fireplace and a really beautiful grate in front of it, right? Not one that's attached to it, but like needs some nice, I don't know, metal work in there. That's included. So if you're on a listing and they have this beautiful fireplace set, you might want to say, hey, y'all leaving that or not, right? So keep that in mind when those pieces are in there, does it matter or not? I see people write storage shed into contracts a lot. You don't need to do it. It's already in there, right? So be aware of what all that is. I've been in houses with people and they're like, hey, this light fixture is from my grandmother. I really love it. I'm like, cool. So you're going to leave it or not? Because it's going to be included automatically, right? So you want to let them know. And I usually say, if you're not going to leave it in, it's a light fixture, let's swap it out before we hit the market, right? You do not want to get to closing and have any unclarity. This is changed right over here. What I mean by that. That's right. So you guys now, it used to say you had to check none if none of these existed: solar panels, water softener, security system, satellite system. Now you don't have to check the box none. It's just check if they have it. Now, if it's in section 2.5.1, they're saying that they own it, right? They own the solar panels, they own the water softener, right? If it's a leased item, you see down here, that's going to jump down to 2.5.7. Now, how do you know if they own the solar panels? How do you know if they own any of this stuff? Communication. That's it. It's communication, right? That's the only way you find out. Now, if y'all know some listing agents don't pick up their phones, that sucks. It is what it is, right? If you're a good listing agent, when you're on an appointment and you see one of these things, you're going to say, hey, is it owned, leased, or is it encumbered? Or what you actually say, less technical term, do you have a loan on it, right? It's going to be one of the 3 options. You want to figure that out. And if you're a smart listing agent and you like to have your weekends to yourself and your family, you're going to put in remarks, right? Confidential information. Solar panels are owned. Solar panels are this, whatever that looks like. So that on Saturday, when you're out with your kids and your family and having fun, they don't have to call you to ask. You've already put it out there. So that's best practice on the listing side. On the buy side, if you don't know what it is, you know, if you're not sure, they haven't put it in there, you have called, texted, and emailed that agent, I'd say go ahead and put it in here as owned, because at the end of the day, if it's not, they're going to need to counter you and you'll have to fix it. Or if they don't own it and they leave it in there like that, they'll have to pay it off before closing, right? So if they pay solar system owned, they don't counter you. You guys get the closing. Well, you guys are getting the solar system that is already paid off. So that's what I would do as a buyer's agent if you do not know. Well, and then there's the other side too, guys. If you're a buyer's agent, this is the most frustrating call to get. Hey, Brian, I was called about the solar panels. And then Brian says to me, well, did you see in the remarks? They're leased. And they're like, oh. And I'm always like, what was your name, buyer's agent? I just want to make sure when we get your offer, I know how to stack it up. Okay, that's great. Awesome. We'll make sure you're on the bottom of the pile. Have a great day. Right? But yeah, you get that too, where the agents don't read it. So it's a double, you know, you guys, let's all be good to one another, right? So keep that in mind. Also, some other things in here, guys. If on property, whether attached or not, you ever had a client that had like stuff that they were storing there? Like, I don't know, some shades or blinds or I don't know, just whatever it could be, because there's a lot of stuff on here, right? So if you see they have a lot of construction stuff on like this whole pile, like, yeah, we're going to take this to the next house, window coverings or any of that stuff. If it's on property, it's automatically included. So make sure that you put into your thing, excluded pile of window coverings or blinds. Maybe you're selling a guy's house that sells blinds for a living. He's got a pile of them in the basement, right? Those would automatically transfer. So be careful, be aware of what's in the contract, okay? Excuse me? What do you mean, what line? Oh, I mean, I'm just saying in an offer, I put it as an exclusion. That's further down. We'll get there in a minute. So other inclusions, this is where you're going to put the refrigerator, the microwave, all those things. Now, guys, I like to be very clear. If it says refrigerator or refrigerators with an S because you have one in the kitchen, one in the garage, don't just use an S. That's not, I mean, it's clear. It means two. But to me, I'd say refrigerator kitchen, refrigerator garage, wine chiller in basement bar, right? Be very specific, because if it's not specific and you guys end up in a gray area, it's going to be judges and court cost and lawyer cost, and you're probably just going to buy them a refrigerator instead of them going through all that hell. So let's avoid that, right? So be very clear in what you're doing in your inclusions there. Now, we get the solar panel that's encumbered, and encumbered means that we have a loan on it, right? That's going to go into this section in 2.5.4. So that could be a solar system, a water softener, right? Any of those different things that are different. So make sure if it is encumbered, that's where it goes. Now on the listing side, how do you know if it's encumbered? A, you ask your seller, right? That's one way. Well, I asked my seller about a year and a half ago, these solar panels, what's up with them? He's like, yeah, I got a loan on them, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, cool. So I'm like, loan. Well, I do another thing. Before my houses hit the market, I pulled a title report on each one. You know what? If it's a loan, it does not show up on title. If it's a lease, or if it's a loan, it will show up. Sorry, if it's a lease, it will not. So you'll see a requirement stating that the loan has to be paid off before closing or transferred to somebody else. You will not see that with a lease. So then I get my title report. I said to my client, I said, hey man, are you sure that that's a lease? Because the title company is pulling it as a loan. He goes, well, let me see. He pulls out his docs. He's like, oh, it is a lease. Because really, what's the difference in some sense? I mean, the difference is at the end, you keep them or not, but in a monthly basis, like he didn't really see a difference in it. So he said lease, it was in fact a loan. I found out by pulling a title commitment. You guys get good with your title reps. You don't have to pay for them. You just say, hey, can I get a TBD title commitment? The nice thing about having a TBD title commitment is one, they'll do it for free. And two, when it comes time to pull a title commitment, you've already done the house. You're just doing the buyer. I can deliver title usually in about, I don't know, a day and a half, because they've already done the big research piece of it. So getting good with your title people and asking for TBDs. I do it all the time.
It will.
Yeah.
Can you clarify for me the difference between the TBD title commitment and O&E?
All right. So the question is, what's the difference between a TBD title commitment and an O&E? There really isn't one. There really is not one. Now, an O&E is a report. A TBD title commitment will show the same information, except it'll be in a title commitment format that we're used to seeing. So it's easier for me to read a commitment, a TBD, because I'm used to seeing it. And instead of costing me like $10, I get it for free. So, but the actual what it shows you is going to be the same. So I'm going to jump down and come back to this personal property and parking. So if it's not an encumberment, right? It's not a loan, but it's a lease, then it goes down to 2.5.7, right? So you'd say solar panels or water softener, right? Is what you'd put in 2.5.7 or 2.5.4, depending on what it is, right? So think about that. 2.5.5 is just saying that all personal property will be in a bill of sale. No big deal there. If you guys ever go to a closing, you'll see a bill of sale. They list it out. Just make sure it's accurate. Parking and storage, you guys. Here's my thing about parking and storage. If it's an attached garage to a house, I don't give a rip. If it's a detached garage in the backyard of a house, I don't give a rip. Where this is really set up for, what this is for is you go to a condo building, right? And then they have a detached garage in the parking lot, in a bank of garages. That's what it's for. Or, you know, they have a reserve spot. That's what this is for. But you have a storage shed in the backyard. That's not what this is for. As we saw up higher, it's already included. But if you ever saw a condo downtown, sometimes those have like a storage unit in the building that's not in the unit, right? So it's a separate area. That's when you want to use this. Otherwise, it doesn't really make sense to me. I don't put anything in there. I don't, like I see like 2-car attached garage all the time, or CTM will automatically pull that in. I'm like, you don't need it. It's obvious, you know, because it's on the property. It's really when it's severed and separate from the property that I think it matters. So I don't think it hurts, but I don't know why do it. Going on down, someone asked me about exclusions. Here you are, section 2.6, right? And again, let's be very specific, right? Are we excluding the TV? Are we excluding the TV and the wall mount? Which one is it, right? Because there's a difference, right? And TVs have gotten weird because they're now attached to houses, right? So I would be very specific, excluding TV and master bedroom, because maybe there's another one in the house that we're not excluding TV and TV mount in master bedroom, right? Be super clear on what that looks like, because we've had deals where it's not that clear and people don't like it when they don't get what they don't expect, right? When they're like, I thought I was getting the TV, you're not getting it, right? Now, if you're on the, huh? Yeah, you guys have mirrors? Oh wait, go back up, right? It says mirrors in there, right? It's right here, y'all. Mirrors. So I can tell you this. I have a friend, he's an antique collector. He's got like a $15,000 mirror in his house. I think he's gonna be happy if that automatically transfers, because it doesn't say bathroom mirrors. So yeah, decorative mirror in a hallway. Yeah, that's fun, right? You would never think that. You'd be like, it's a decoration. That's my $15,000 antique. No, that would stay with the house if you did not exclude it. And that's gonna be really awesome for you, isn't it? Oh man, all right? So be very clear on the exclusions, right? You just do not want to get stuck buying a mirror, you know? And it's weird. Like I have in my house, I have a, what do they call, like a standing mirror. Here's what I'm talking about, it sits on the floor. That would automatically be included. That mirror is probably worth like $500. I guess the mirrors are only if they're attached. Fair enough, Brenda, but still. Oh no, actually mine is attached so my kid doesn't pull it off the wall. It has an anchor, so mine is attached. So I have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. Brenda, did you have another question? That's where I saw it go up and then, now what if it comes back?
Will, I have a question.
Hold on 1 second. What'd you say?
I have a question. On
Hey, the person on Zoom, hold on 1 second. I'm taking a question here in class first. What'd you say, Brenda? Yeah, like refrigerator, microwave, all that stuff, yeah. I still put them every time. So here's the thing. So the question is, if there's a TV and it's wall mounted, how do we deal with that? I'd put it in the contract as included or excluded, because it's a very gray area. It's attached to the house at this point. It's not outlined in the contract. I wish they would actually put that in there. I would do that now. If I'm on the buy side, I'm going to put excluded. I'm going to put into additional provisions prior to closing. Seller shall patch holes, because do they have to? Do they not? I don't know. And it's only going to cost a few $100 to have a handyman do it. So if they don't do it, am I going to really take them to court over a few $100? So I would just put into additional provisions, seller shall patch that. But does anyone know how hard the market is out there right now? Yeah, so I wouldn't do that. I'd say, hey, buyer, you're patching the holes if they don't. We're not putting it into the offer if you want to get accepted out of the 37 offers on that house. All right, Kenny, I'll get to you in a second. I had a Zoom question too. I'm sorry about that.
So 2.6, putting seller's personal property.
Yeah, so in 2.6, you can put seller's personal property, but keep in mind, personal property is defined. So it should be a capital P and a capital P. You can put that in there. Absolutely. So if you all seller's personal property. Now, I don't think you need to put that in there, but I don't think it hurts either to make sure that they remove it. And you guys don't have to have a junk company come clean it out. But yeah, seller's personal property, capital S for seller, capital P for personal, and capital P for property. Kenny, what do you got, buddy? So the question is, if you put seller's personal property, what happens to refrigerators and other things like that? That's where my inclusions always state all the appliances. So it's not gray, it's crystal clear. And if I put seller's personal property, which I do a lot into section 2.6, that means they can't leave a bed. And you might be like, well, who's gonna leave a bed? I've seen some disgusting mattresses, right? I have moved and said, I don't want to move any of this crap. I'm getting new furniture with the new house. And if my personal property wasn't excluded, what can I now leave it? No, if it's not in the contract in either way. So that's why I like to exclude personal property so that there's no question. I disagree with that. I think that if you put a refrigerator up top and you put a seller's personal property below, I think the refrigerator's staying. I don't think there's gonna be an issue. I don't know. I mean, there's different schools of thought on this. I'm not sure. Would you say taught that? And I don't know. I mean, Randy's a good guy. I don't know. But I don't think that one's gonna supersede the other, because a big thing that courts do is they look at what's called intent. And it's very clear what your intent was. I don't want all your shit. I just want these 5 pieces of property that I put in inclusions. So I think a judge is gonna read intent and they're gonna say, no. That did not supersede that. That's what I think. Absolutely. All right, guys. Who in here deals with water rights, mineral rights? Anybody? Right? We do a little bit, not often. Now, when we do, my big thing is this: make sure you're qualified on whatever you're advising on. You're probably gonna need an attorney, right? Because water rights, mineral rights are a very hard thing to research. Title insurance will not cover them. So just keep that in mind. If a house comes with water rights and they really want it, or mineral rights, you're gonna want to say, hey, get an attorney to verify you have them. If a house doesn't come with them, then it doesn't matter. Now, there's a water rights review deadline. It's right here. So the water rights review deadline, the house comes with water rights and your client's like, cool, it's a bonus. I've sold a house like that. They're like, yeah, it's fine. If we get them, that's cool. If not, we don't really care. So for that, if the buyer doesn't care, I'd say the buyer does not have the right? I would not do the deadline. You can either put that the buyer does not have the right, or you can just leave the deadline blank in the deadline section. But if they really want the water rights, you should put that they do have the right, and give yourself probably at least 2 weeks to investigate the water rights, right? So it depends if they want them or not. If y'all ever need a recommendation for a water rights or mineral rights attorney, I've got them in my phone. I'm happy to text you their contact info. Now, I said leave the date and deadline blank, because keep in mind, we're gonna get down here below dates and deadlines that says this, but if there's no date or deadline, that provision does not exist. So if earnest money, I had no date or deadline, there is no earnest money deadline. There is no earnest money at that point, right? If you're ever confused, you're like, what does this deadline mean? This off-record title, whatever that is, go over to here. You see this little squiggly looking thing and a number, that's telling you where it is in the contract. So you're like, how do I know what this means? Like, should I be using this third-party right, which we're gonna get to here soon? Should I use that deadline or not? I don't know. Go to section 8 and read it, right? So that's a good thing to think about in there, okay? I'm not gonna go through all my deadlines, okay? There is a Damian Cox template. You can get it from the office. In fact, the office emailed it out to everyone about 2.5 weeks ago. So if you don't have it, go to Britt and Cheryl. They'd be happy to give you a copy of it. But I would say go with Damian Cox's deadlines. They're very realistic. It's set up for a 30-day close, though. Keep that in mind. So going down to here, guys, just so y'all know, FHA and VA, if that's the type of loan you were doing, You do not need to put appraisal deadlines in. If you do put appraisal deadlines in, they don't matter. So that's up to you if you do them or not. I don't do them. Now, like I was saying, applicability of terms, it talks about if you leave a date or deadline blank, that provision goes away. So that's what it's saying there. Also, if you put an NA,
Mark.
is that just unmuted or is that a question? Okay, good. All right, so if you leave something with NA or deleted, that provision goes away as well. And I'll show you a really big place where that happens a lot and is not good. So just so you all know, MEC, if you ever see that in a contract, that means mutual execution of contract. That's when we've signed and the other side has signed. We've all mutually executed it. Now, section 3 has changed. You all know that a day ends at 11:59 p.m., right? That's when our day ends. Now you can put in what's called a time of day deadline. So you might say, I don't do business that late. Like I go to bed at 8:30, guys. I don't do business after 8:30. So I might say my time of day deadline should be 7 o'clock, right? Whatever that looks like. Now, if you're going to practice your business and you say my time of deadline, the way I operate is 6 p.m., make sure your clients are aware because that may not work with their lifestyle, right? If husband and wife work different schedules and they can't talk till 7 o'clock at night about things, 6 p.m. doesn't work for them. Right now, how do I avoid working after 8:30 at night or really after about 5 o'clock in the day every day? It's because I'm proactive. I'm not dealing with my inspection resolution on resolution deadline. I'm dealing with it the day before so that I'm not running into these 11:59 p.m. late night negotiations. The agent that says to me, well, you know, I work really hard for my clients, so I'm on the phone at 10 o'clock at night. I look at them, I'm like, you're an idiot. You just don't control your schedule the right way. So I don't think that you need a time of day deadline. If you really want to use them, go for it. Just be aware of it because it can have implications later where deals just automatically die at a certain time. Like your inspection resolution deadline, if your time of day is 6 p.m., it would die at 6 p.m. if y'all have not resolved the inspection. Section 3.3.3, it says, if a deadline falls on a weekend or a holiday, what do we do, right? So I love this. I always put will. You guys can put what you want on there. I can tell you I have a closing on the 21st of this month. Anyone know what the day is on the 21st of this month? No, it's a Monday. It's President's Day, guys. I didn't realize that. Come on. Do you know how many holidays there are? And do you know how many new holidays? And it's not just federal. It's also local ones too, right? Colorado holidays. So I'd be careful with putting will not. The only thing that you have to keep in mind though, if I send you an offer and I put a deadline of Sunday at 12, you really have till Monday, right? So that's the one place where if you want to play hardball with an offer and you're like, I'm not giving you till Tuesday, you got till Sunday at noon. If you put will in there, you won't actually have that ability. All right, guys, price and terms, pretty basic, you know, put in what you got to put in, make sure the two sides balance out, right? Now, seller concession. Remember I told you if you put NA or deleted, it takes the provision out. So imagine if I put NA into that box. Hold on a second. What question do you have, Dulce? What do you mean? So I'm gonna hit that in section 10. And we'll talk a lot about them because it depends what deadlines you have in there. If I only have inspection objection as a deadline, I can't actually terminate. If I have inspection termination as a deadline, I can't. But we'll get to that in section 10. Don't worry. Because there has been a change with inspection termination. We're gonna hit that hard. All right, so if in section 4.2, I say, well, I don't need a seller concession. My buyer's awesome, right? They don't need it. So I put NA in there. I'm like, it doesn't apply. Or y'all, CTM automatically puts NA into a lot of blanks. You can turn that off just so you know. I don't know how to do it, but it's possible. So I would put the number 0 in there, 0.00. That's what I put in there. Because what happens, you'd be like, my buyer doesn't need seller concessions. We get to inspection, they're like, hey, we'll give you $2,000 in seller concessions. This has now been deleted because I had NA in my original offer. So they send over an amendment that says the seller shall provide buyer $2,000 of seller concessions at closing. And that's awesome. Could the seller welch on that? I think they could because it's no longer defined, right? I actually had a deal recently where I was on the listing side and it was deleted. We went ahead and gave them the seller concession. We didn't want to have to deal with court and nasty stuff, but a smart, savvy seller could say, maybe their real estate attorney says, well, 4.2 is gone, so I'll agree to $5 billion of seller concessions because it's not defined. So no, because it's no longer in the contract. So when you use the word seller concession, it's a defined term, right? It's in big bold letters, right? Capitalize each word. So when they say seller concession, what are they referring to? I don't even know what they're referring to. So if you've messed up and you've deleted it accidentally, what your amend should say is you should take this whole section in 4.2, copy and paste it into the amend. Because now you've redefined it and put it back into the contract. So yeah, the amend extend would supersede it if I took the whole paragraph. But if I just took a defined term that no longer exists in my contract, it will not. Does that make sense? Cool, cool. All right. Going on down, guys. Earnest money. I think that personal, I like the word check because I don't know if it's personal or business or cashiers or what. And I like the word wire. I do not like the word good funds. I believe the way good funds is defined is as money due at closing, where earnest money is money that's due today or whenever it's due, right? And then who's it held by? It's generally the title company, unless you're working like with Remax or a few other companies, okay? Going on down. So I'm not going to go through every little section because there's a lot of legalese and not super fun stuff that we even deal with. So there are parts I'll skip over. If you have questions, let me know. But there's really not a whole lot that I'm going to just go through line by line. I will tell you this. This was changed right here. The buyer used to not have a remedy or an issue if they didn't timely release earnest money. They added that in there in 4.3.2.2. Good funds, as I said before, it's all amounts payable by the parties at closing. So a lot of times CTM and my earnest money will automatically import good funds. A lot of agents put that in there, but I don't understand how that works. It says at closing on there. So I don't know. That's where I don't think it works in the contract. What do you got, Brenda? Yeah. I mean, the buyer, so if I have my earnest money deadlines Monday and I don't turn it in on Monday by, 11:59 p.m., which really at 5 p.m. because title companies close, right? I'm in default. If I'm in default, we can move on. So I know many agents, I'm not saying it's a good practice, that keep a house as active until earnest money is turned over. I know a lot of agents that do that. Now here's the pro of it, right? If you think about it, once you go under contract, you start getting a record on MLS, right? So if it's going to die right there, a record of 2 days in, it goes under contract, comes back out. Some people say, what's wrong with the house, right? Nothing. But so I know agents that don't do that. Now, MLS rules, I believe, are 72 hours. I'm not sure if it's business or just hours that you must change status. So you risk a fine. I can tell you, RE Colorado is not too bad about fining. If you call them and say you're sorry, they usually don't fine you. Iris up north, you're a freaking minute over. They will fine you. They love fining. So do what you want to do on that, right? Available funds, right? So it talks about having available funds. What does that mean? You either do or you do not have it. It has to be immediately verifiable. So available funds can't be like, well, I'm going to get a gift at closing. Like, you got to verify the gift, right? So if you're putting $100,000 down and you say that I do have the funds available, that if I have to sell my house, they're not immediately available, right? So a conditional sale, it does not, right? If I have to get CHFA to pay my down payment, do I have the available funds? Not necessarily, right? So be careful if you do or you do not have it. Now, when I'm on the listing side and they do not have it, I just want to ask why. May not be a big deal. We might be open to a conditional sale or taking CHFA down payment assistance or something like that. But if you do not have the money and it says stated at cash at closing, right? If you go back to the price box, that'd be this number here. So if you're getting down payment assistance, you don't have the cash at closing usually. That's why you're getting down payment assistance. Why would that be a violation? I believe you do have to disclose that because to me, that's an adverse material fact, right? That means that you don't have all the money to perform. It means you're a weak buyer. So I've never heard that you can't ask that. I ask it every time. I mean, unless they're putting like, tons of money down, but if they're putting like 3.5% down or 3% down, I ask every time. So.
I'm sorry, what do you ask?
Oh, sorry. The question was, if they're using down payment assistance, are you allowed to, does the lender have to disclose that? I believe, yes, they do. and someone was told that that's a violation, that you can't disclose that, I believe you can, because that's an adverse material fact. So going on down, y'all, loan limitations, right? Keep this in mind. This is where you pick a type of loan. And you might say, well, I'm going to go conventional, but then you get under contract. You're like, actually, FHA is better. I'm going to switch to FHA. If I've only checked the conventional box, I do not have the right as a buyer to switch loan types. So it might be better for me, but I need to call the seller's agent and say, hey, we're switching loan types because of ABC. We need to amend the contract. Now, I've had buyers that say, I'm not sure, do I want to go FHA or conventional? It depends. Check both boxes. Now, I'll tell you, on the listing side, that looks pretty sketchy. You're like, they haven't even really decided what lane to drive in yet. So get comfortable, know what loan you're doing, and go from there. The reason the word bond is there, so Jules say, I think that this goes right to what that lender said. The word bond, what do y'all think that is? Down payment assistance. That's where you're disclosing it right there. Why does it say bond? Down payment assistance is funded through a bond program. So whether the lender discloses it or not, you should as an agent. Now, that could be some sort of weird private financing or something like that. If I'm doing FHA and I'm doing Jaffa, it's FHA bond. If I'm doing, hey, I can do a 3% down conventional with Jaffa, or it'd be conventional bond. If they're using a bond program to pay for their house, absolutely. That's called being in full disclosure and being honest. No, I mean, it'd be like, if it's an FHA Jaffa deal, it'd be bond and FHA. You could even do down payment assistance with VA. No one does, but you could. So you could be VA and bond, or you can do a conventional. Usually they do the 3% down conventional and bond. Yeah. Other, I mean, other is going to be, he just said, would you do bond and other? And I don't know why you're going there, but other is going to be something weird, some sort of weird financing. I've never really seen it happen. Maybe, yeah, you do hard money, absolutely. Actually, I have seen it now I think about it. The hard money is you're gonna hit other and you're gonna write in hard money. If it's cash, you put none, because this is only for your loan limitations. So if it's cash, you just leave it blank. All of section 4 is blank if you're cash. All right, going on down, guys. Once you get to 4.6, I would highly recommend, guys, starting to learn about assumptive loans. I don't think anyone in here, actually, I know no one in here practiced real estate in the early 80s. In the 80s, guys, real estate or inflation was like it is today. Bless you. Inflation was really high. In fact, today we beat the last time that inflation was higher was February of 1982. Inflation was 7.5% today, guys. 7.5. So with that, we're going to see interest rates probably shoot up. That's my guess. They got into the teens. Like my dad bought a house with like a 13% interest rate. So, I mean, 4% is nothing. 5% is really nothing too. 6% is not that bad. But I have a house right now that I own at 2.25%. So what if I could sell it and someone could assume my loan? Is there extra value? There absolutely is. So if you can be the agent that can figure out how to do assumptive loans and do all this, when you're on a listing and you say, well, what's your interest rate? And they're like, it's 2.5. And let's just say the interest rates are 5%. You could say, well, hey, what if we can find someone not only to buy your house, but to assume your loan? Because then we have the extra value of your interest rate, right? So the more tools you have in your tool belt, the more knowledge you have, the more you can do for your clients. So I don't see a lot of classes on assumptive loans, but I'll tell you guys, as soon as I see when I'm taking them, because they're coming. When interest rates are 8, 9%, people are gonna look at me and they'll say, Mr. Story, I want your 2.25% loan, right? So just make sure if you're doing assumptive loans or any seller financing that you are competent. I've done seller financing. I can tell you when we do it, we generally bring an attorney in, right? So just be careful and be competent in doing that, because the real estate commission does not take kindly to people that are doing work incompetently. Do you mean if you're the listing agent or I mean, the buyer's agent should have had it in the first place, but yeah, you could amend the contract later. You could counter it, however, to clean it up, but I'd have it in the contract. I have not done an assumption loan yet, but I have done seller financing a few times. Didn't qualify. I think it's to become more and more. Like right now, interest rates are in about the mid 3s, right? But when we get to, if we get to 5 or 6%, I mean, 2.5 versus 5%, that's be hugely different. So if the loan is FHA or VA, the assumption is a lot easier. Conventional, it just depends. Now VA, it has to go from VA to VA, right? So if they're not military, they can't assume it, but FHA loans are pretty easy to assume from what I understand, but I can tell you, I'm not an expert. I want to learn more. What do you got? So say I have 100,000 in equity in my house and you're assuming my loan. Well, a lot of times you have to pay me 100K and do your loan. So it's funky, but you got someone that's like cash rich, like it could work. I have a good friend named Gordon. He's been doing this since 72. And he's like, dude, in the 80s is all we did because people couldn't buy houses at 12 and 13%. And if we get to that high, it's either gonna be the market just slows down. And a lot of people are gonna say, I don't know how to sell houses anymore. And then there's gonna be opportunists that say, man, I went and took all these classes on assumptive loans. I can grease the wheels and keep the business going. Where all these other people are gonna say, I can't figure out how to do it because my people can't qualify for houses. So that's what I'm saying. I highly recommend taking that class. I don't know what it'll look like, but I do think interest rates will go up. And even if it's just 5%, it's added value. All right, guys, going on down. Loan, it's changed. There are 3 deadlines for loans now. There used to be 2. First one, new loan application. That is still there. Keep this in mind, guys. This is how you practice real estate, and it is what's technically right. You cannot technically have a complete loan application unless you have a property address, like you're under contract. So you can do one of 2 things. You can say on your loan application deadline, either A, it's complete or done. That's what I do. Or B, the technical right way is to put about 3 days into the contract, the deadline, because that gives the lender the time to receive the contract and to finalize the loan application. So I put done because I can tell you, I talked to someone about this once and they were like, you need it 3 days in? They haven't even applied for a loan yet? They're not going to take your offer some of the times. Now, if you did that to me, I'd say, this is actually a really smart contract person. They understand how it works. But a lot of listing agents won't. So don't lose out because you're like, well, I want to be technically right. I would just go with what we say is contract practice, which is to put complete or done. Now, the other 2 loans, new loan terms and new loan availability. Think of it this way. Our old thing was called loan termination. It had 2 parts to it. One was this. Do I like my terms? Am I good with all the terms? The other one was, did I get the loan or not? They've split it in half is what they've done. So new loan terms is, am I good with all the terms? My payment, my interest rate, my down payment, all that stuff. Am I cool with it? Right? That you're going to want to put about 7 to 10 days into the contract because you do not know your final loan terms until you lock your interest rate. And then you know what it is. You can't lock an interest rate without a house. So my recommendation is to put about 7 to 10 days in. Now, with Truth in Lending and all this other stuff, if you get fully approved on a house, you have a really good idea of what your costs are. I mean, it's not like it's a real surprise. Unless interest rates also go up a half point, your lender should be able to say, your down payment's about this on a $500,000 house, and your payment's about this. The only wild card is where we end up on the interest rate. So if you want to be very aggressive in this market, you could take the loan terms deadline out, right? So they have to accept whatever loan they get. And they should have a good idea of what it looks like. Now, the deadline I would not remove is new loan availability. So that's, do we get the loan or do we not get the loan? Which one is it, right? Now with that, you're gonna wanna put that where you used to put loan termination, approximately 3 to 5 days before closing, right? You wanna have clear to close before you go past loan availability deadline. Do y'all have questions about those deadlines? Now, I wanna make this very clear because I had someone that told you I'm keeping 25,000 earnest money. They said, well, we had an appraisal issue. I said, I don't care. We're past appraisal deadlines. If you look in there, buyer does not have the right to terminate new loan availability based on the loan terms, appraised value, lender property requirements, right? If maybe the lender said, hey, this has to be fixed before we can do it, right? What else is there? Insurability or conditional sale. So someone's like, well, I just won't put my conditional sale in, but when we don't get it sold, we just won't get the loan. I'll kill it. Well, no, that's not a valid reason. Now, there's nothing in this that says that the lender has to tell them anything or put anything into writing about it. But I'll tell you all this, if a seller's really ticked off that you pulled out last minute, I would just make the whole situation diffused really quickly by having the lender reach out directly to the buyer's agent by email in writing saying, or not the buyer's agent, the listing agent saying, hey, the buyer did not get the loan. They were not fully approved. So sorry this didn't work out. If you have any questions, feel free to call me. Right? That way, if the seller's like, no, they had buyer's remorse or they were mad that they're having to bring 50,000 in appraisal gap, right? because that's happening nowadays, right? So if the seller feels that way, that should diffuse it and keep you all out of mediation. I think in mediation you'd win, but who wants to have that nasty fight, right? So I'd say have your lender just send that email and move on. Anyone have questions about new loan stuff? Sweet. Now, we're talking about assumptive loans, right? 5.3, 5.4. We're looking at credit information, existing loan documentation. So, this is what we're looking at, seller financing, assumptive loans. So leave that section alone unless you're qualified. All right, section 6. All right, guys, this is all about the appraisal. Appraisals are a big deal right now. I don't know how you can waive an appraisal, by the way, unless the lender approves that. I see appraisal waived. I don't know what that means. I think that just means that you're willing to cover any gap there is. So if you say like, it's a $600,000 house, we're waiving our appraisal rights. What if it appraised at $1? That's $599,000, 99, whatever you got to bring to closing. That's probably not going to happen, but be careful with appraisals, guys. Right now, people are overpaying for houses like crazy, and it's all fun and good as long as the tower of cards continues to grow. Eventually, the tower is going to fall. And if your buyer is buying a house VA, which means mostly on VA, by the way, they go in underwater. They have zero equity in the house. They go in VA and they're way overpaying, and the market does slow down, they're going to be underwater. They're not going to be happy with you. So make sure you people are educated when they're messing with appraisals. Now, I want to point this out. If you ever list a property, you might say, why do I care about the appraisal deadline, right? Well, if you look at conventional, if the appraisal is not to the buyer by the appraisal deadline, they can have buyer's remorse. So they can object if they have not received it on or before the appraisal deadline. So when I get to appraisal deadline, if the buy side has not received it, I want to push the appraisal deadline back. Maybe not the objection deadline, but the appraisal deadline back, because then they could say, we didn't get it in time. And I know, and then they do get it, but they got it after the deadline. And they've maybe agreed to a $50,000 appraisal gap. And they're like, come on, baby, come on, good. And it comes in 50,000 under. Well, they have to be okay with the 50,000 appraisal gap. But since they got the appraisal a day late, they could walk away. So be very cognizant of your appraisal deadline, because if it goes past, and the buyer can have buyer's remorse, it's right there on the contract. You guys understand that? Cool. So no. So you have to object before the appraisal objection deadline. So let's just say that today is my appraisal deadline. I get it tomorrow, right? At this point now, as long as before object, it doesn't matter what the value is, I could walk away. So if it came in uber low and I'm like, damn, I don't want to do that $100,000 appraisal gap, and I'm smart enough to have read the contract, I say, well, I didn't receive it on or before the appraisal deadline, I can walk away. So that's where you have this massive appraisal gap. You're like, well, they're stuck to it. It doesn't matter. And if they don't, we've got 20,000 earnest money. This is their back door. So be cognizant of your appraisal deadline, guys. It really, really matters. Going on down, I think you all understand how the appraisal process works in terms of objecting and terminating. But there is a big thing there that I like to look at is in lender property requirements, right? So I don't know what you guys do for your inspection or your resolution and objection on appraisal. I'd have them no more than 3 days apart. And here's why. Where is it? So it says right here, this contract terminates on the earlier of 3 days following the seller's receipt of lender property requirements or closing unless you've resolved it, basically. So let's just say my objection deadline, it doesn't say business days on there, does it? It doesn't say. So I don't want to go to court and find out if that's business or working days. So let's just say on Thursday, I get a lender requirement. You guys got to repaint the house with all this peeling paint. Send that over to you guys on Thursday. My resolution deadline's on Tuesday. I'm like, cool. So Tuesday, y'all reach out. You say, hey, we'll go ahead. We'll repaint the barn. It's fine, We're more than 3 days. We have a terminated contract, right? So be cognizant of that. So for me, I want objection and resolution no more than 3 days apart, because if there is a lender property requirement, you're like, oh, my deadline's on Tuesday. I'm totally good. I'll be there. We're over 3 days. And then if you had a backup offer in place, you'd have to go to it automatically. Even though you might have wanted to just get this deal closed in a week because closing date's a week away. So I don't know if people are aware of this, but if they are, I mean, it's just another backdoor out. So I would say get the requirements over. Either A, have to have an agreement in writing to satisfy the requirements, or B, they just have to have been completed, or C, the lender has to waive them. I've never had a lender waive requirements. So
In that case, like you would get the appraisal and it has conditions and you would amend the objection or
no, I would object. I'd object and say, hey, you guys need to fix whatever. But within 3 days, we need to come into agreement on how we're going to fix it. A lot of people wouldn't say, don't understand the 3-day part. They would say, we guys got to do it by resolution. No, it's whichever one's first. So, cost of appraisal, guys. I don't know. I've had one seller pay for it. It's almost always the buyer. Section 7, just so y'all know, there is a lot of stuff in here. A friend of mine in the office right now is working with this weird FSBO awful situation. And the HOA documents, she's not getting all of them, right? Keep in mind, there are so many of them. I commonly stress to my sellers, I say, do not try to pull all these. Because if you just look in section 7.3, my God, right? Whenever I have a seller, I'm like, you know, my title company will pull them for like $100, like $100. And I'm like, yeah, do you see this whole section? Do you have all those? Like, oh God, that's a lot of paper, right? And then they paid $100. So I'd always recommend having a third party do it. That way it's all done. But if your seller wants to really do it, go for it. I don't necessarily think that you should be pulling the documents because if they're incomplete, what are you risking yourself at, right? Going down to section 8. So seller selects title company, right? Or buyer selects title company. Anyone here ever worked with a really bad title company? I've had a deal not close on time because of a really bad title company, right? And then, you know, there's other things like what if they go broke or something like that? So the title company you work with does matter. So if it's a company you've never heard of, or was it WFG? Damien hates them. I can say I'm doing a deal with them right now. I totally understand it. You might say that the buyer selects title company, but keep in mind, if buyer selects, buyer will pay. And we're also in a pretty competitive market. Now, those listing agents, they have those big egos. So keep in mind, if you're saying, well, we're going to pick, you're going to pick, it's my listing. I picked and I got the relationship with them. So you might piss them off. It is what it is. I mean, going with WGF or whatever it is, WFG, is that what it is? WFG, like Ascendance, they have a good drink selection though at their closing. Oh, they've changed. They used to have Yoo-hoo. But you guys, if you're selecting title right now, like you might piss the other side off. Now, I would say this though, if you're gonna have the buyer pick, let them pay. You can supersede that. I've had investors that say they check 8.1.2 and they say buyer picks, but then what they do is they go into additional provisions and they take this and they say buyer will select title company and they'll furnish at seller's expense, right? So I've seen many investors do it that way because they like to work with the same title company all the time. One thing that some investors will say is, I want to work with the same company because that way, when I sell it with the same company, it's cheaper. That's called a reissue rate. Most title companies will honor reissue rates even if they didn't issue it the first time. Rocky Mountain Title? Yeah? Yeah, I mean, they're right upstairs. You can look at whatever you want, guys. I'll tell you this, I think that any of your vendors should help you build your business. You know, if they're willing to help you build your business, that's what matters, right? Owner's extended coverage. I don't know why you would ever not do this. I know some investors that don't do it. If you own the house for 90 days, 120 days, I'd still have all this because all the basic coverage you get for roughly $80 is pretty good. Like what about an unrecorded mechanics lien? That could be a few $100s or a few thousand. So I personally always recommend this to my clients. I've gotten an offer before my listing that had it blank. I said to the other side, I go, did y'all mean to do that? And they did not. So we actually put it into a counter for them to be nice. So it's up to you. Now, does buyer pay, seller pay, or half and half? To me, it depends. I recently put a house under contract for 10K under. And with that, yeah, we put that it was half and half. You know, it just depends on how competitive it is, guys. If you're in a multiple offer situation, have the buyer pay the $80. Just trust me, it makes sense, right? This goes through all the different title documents, when they'll get them, what they are. So if you're like, what's record title versus off record title? You know, I'm not gonna go through and read this, but the basic thing is record title is like stuff that you can pull from the county. usually, and off-record title is stuff that you just got to find, right? Like the buyer, the seller may just have these documents, right? Special tax districts, guys, be aware of them. You're going to learn about it on the tax certification, the tax cert as we call it. So if there is a special tax district, it'll tell you what's going on with it, where they are financially in different pieces like that. In section 8.5, it talks about a tax cert. This is brand new. It was not in here. Who's going to pay for it? Buyer or seller? Well, you say competitive market. It's only 25 bucks. I'll put it on the buyer. Well, if they're VA or FHA, they can't technically pay it. Now, what I'd probably do, because I can tell you for years, title has been putting it on the buyer every single time. They didn't realize that VA and FHA can't pay it. So they do it. The lenders weren't even aware of it. And it just happened. So I can tell you guys this, technically they can't pay it, but in a competitive situation, I don't want a seller to be like, I'm paying for this tax certification, and they don't even know what it costs. They're going to assume it's like $2,000 or something, right? So I just put on the buyer every time, but do it how you want. Third party of right to purchase and approve. So this used to be, if you knew the old deadline, it was called the first right of refusal, is what it was called. That deadline was usually improperly used, so I'm glad they renamed it. Here's what it means. Some HOAs, it's usually in an HOA situation, or I could see it in a rental situation too, but you have like a condo complex and they say, if you're gonna sell your place, before you sell it, you know, you got to shop it to the condo complex. Now, what that looks like and how it functions would be different with each HOA and each condo. I've had it happen one time in my career. You would think it was at some swanky place. It wasn't. It was like a $135,000 condo. And theirs worked like this. We had to get an offer. And once we had the offer, there's a 15-day period where anyone in the complex could match it. They didn't have to beat it, just match it, right? And then they could become the buyer. So we knew about this. We told the buyers before, hey, this is what it looks like. And it was not a great listing. So when they wrote their offer, I was fine with this. They wrote their inspection period like 17 days in. So we could get to that 15-day period before they spent the money on inspection. So keep in mind, if you're on the buy side and be like, well, there's a 15-day shopping period, try to get the inspection period after that. Try to not have your client spend the money on it until they know they're getting it. Again, it's very rare. The other place that you'll see this, I haven't, but I know this happens. Someone rents a house, right? And they have in their lease, if you're going to sell it, landlord, I get a bite at it first. That does happen in leases. So keep that in mind too. That's the other place I could see it if there's a renter in place. But otherwise, like I said, I've had it happen one time. It is super, super rare. Anyone else ever had it happen?
I've had it. For housing.
For
They
where?
have to
Low
approve
income
the buyer,
housing?
approve the buyer. There's a lot of Central Park.
Hold on one second, Dual say. So someone's saying that they've had it happen with low income housing. They're talking about something different. So you're talking about in low income housing, there's certain approvals that have to happen, but that's different. If I own in the complex in low income housing, it doesn't mean I have the right to buy all the other ones first. So with low income housing, that's just going through their process of being approved as a low income person. That has nothing to do with this. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And Dual say, what were you saying?
I was asking that if I would apply to these two, I'm not sure how.
I mean, it just depends how it's written. I mean, it could be in a lease to own, you know, but usually in a lease to own, you don't have the right to sell it because I'm on the path of buying it from you, you know, but any contract can be drafted anyway. So I don't know. Going on down to section 9, guys. Section 9, surveys. I believe in giving my clients options, letting them decide. I don't make decisions. So if I leave section 9 blank and I don't put anything in here and I put survey deadlines, there's no survey that can take place, right? And no survey objections. I've left it blank, so it's no longer applies. Now we're in a very competitive market. Keep that in mind. So with that, maybe you want the survey deadlines, maybe you don't. Now I sold a house in like Park Hill, right? I did not help the guy buy the house. He bought it like 6 months before without me. And after closing, the next year he gets a tax bill for like $300, right? And this guy, he had like the teardrop tattoos and all that. He scared the heck out of me, right? So he calls me up. He's like, Mr. Will. I'm like, what's up, Martin? He's like, why am I getting a tax bill for $300? I'm like, I don't know. He's like, and so we look into it. We find out, let's just imagine that this red square is his lot. This is in Park Hill. We're not talking some weird random place, right? And there's a house here, right? His house is right here. There's a concrete pad right here, and then there's a house here, right? And there's an alley here and a street here. I assume the red box is his lot, right? I'm on the listing side, and there's even a fence. I'm like, that's got to be his lot. Now, there's a piece of land here that was 2 feet wide and runs the entire length of the property that was not part of his lot. But he owned that too. So when he bought both unknowingly with a different agent. When we sold it, we only sold the other side. We didn't sell both lots. We didn't know to, right? Because the title policy didn't show that there's this weird sliver attached. So he gets a tax bill for $300, which he would have gotten every year forever for a piece of land he really can't use. It's 2 feet wide. So he calls me all pissed off, and I'm like, oh God, how am I going to handle this? So I call the buyer's agent. I say, hey, do you know what's going on with this? And I educate the buyer's agent. He's like, well, it sucks. I'm like, yeah, had you all done a survey, you would have known. He goes, well, is he going to just give it to the buyer? I go, no. I go, the buyer's going to have to buy it from him. He goes, well, for how much? I go, for the tax bill. And the buyer's agent ended up buying it for the buyer. Because at first he said no. And I said, well, Mr. Martin Bonilla is going to be hanging out in this concrete pad every day. And if you really want that, he'll be hanging out there. And I can tell you, after he went there one time, the buyer's agent called me and said, we're happy to get this done. So we did a quick claim deed and they paid the tax bill. So be careful. So you might say it's very clear what it is. It may be, it may not be. So I just like to tell my clients, I give them this story every time. I say, you know, it's up to you. I know it looks cookie cutter. You know, it should be fine, but you never know. I wouldn't worry so much in new builds like in Highlands Ranch, like Sterling Ranch, or like newer Thornton, but something old could be like this. I can tell you, we just sold a house. Well, we're closing today on it, or tomorrow, I'm not sure. Like this. This is the lot. Now, this one, you might say, well, of course you'd want to do a survey. It's up in Bailey. It's about 3 acres, right? We didn't help them buy the lot. It's been in there forever. That's what we all thought was the lot. Well, the lot's more like this. And about a third of the property is not on the lot. So you might say this is very clear, but it's not always. So if people are buying acreage, they should probably do a survey. But that's, you know, up to them. Let them know what can happen to fix this issue. We had like 5 different neighbors that had to like go through. We had to redo all legal descriptions. There was about $8,000 in costs. It was a mess. We've been under contract with these people for about 80 days or so, and we're closing today or tomorrow. So surveys do matter. I usually put in there that the buyer will order it. Why the buyer? Because I'm a control freak, and that way I can control the situation. And I say if seller's closing company, because you guys know the contract doesn't say title company anywhere in it, but it does say closing company. That's what the title company requires a survey, seller will pay. And then I add if buyer's lender requires survey, buyer will pay, right? I've never had a lender require a survey in my life. I've had many title companies do it. I've had them do it. I was in Lafayette selling a duplex in like downtown Lafayette. It was very clear, but title will look at aerial shots. They had added a shed into the backyard, so the title company called for an ILC, right? So that's up to you how you do it, but that's how I generally do it. In this competitive Uber market, a lot of times I'm like, well, guys, if you feel comfortable not doing a survey, you can leave it out. It makes your offer look better and more competitive.
How much is a an ILC?
How much is an ILC? I think an ILC is running like $500 right now. We just paid like $800 on one, but it was also, there was a rush fee. Does anyone know ILCs right now, 500-ish? It depends. That's fair. You know, it depends how remote it is. Depends how fast you need it. I can tell you, if you get an ILC requirement, call immediately because all these companies are backed up right now. Yeah, weeks. Yeah, I mean, so Brian had to delay closing on one. For our ILC to happen in 8 days, we paid like a $250 rush fee. So there you go. So it's tough, guys, but I would just say as soon as you get that requirement, no. Now, how did we know we had an ILC requirement? Oh, we did TBD title commitment. So we knew right out of the gate. So it was pretty awesome. All right, guys, section 10 goes through, you know, all the disclosures and inspection and other things about the house, right? So I'm going to go right to inspection. So there are 3 inspection deadlines, right? That's not new. We've had that since 2019. So there's inspection resolution. I think we all know what that is. That's the last one. But now it has changed. Inspection termination, if you choose to use that deadline, has to be on or before inspection objection. The whole idea is this. I don't know if y'all ever read those books. I love them. They're called Choose Your Own Adventure. When you were a kid, get to the bottom of the page, you'd be like, you want to go to the scary cave and chase after the people, go to page 72. You want to go home to mommy, go to page 65, right? I love those books. So that's what you get to do now. It's I either object and say, here's my issues, let's negotiate, or I terminate and walk away. It's one or the other. That's all it is. And if you terminate, it's over, you move on. If you object, then you need to try to negotiate until resolution. I'm not a fan of having those deadlines like 5-6 days apart. Now, I also don't like them back to back either, because you know, when they're back to back, the problem I have there is, what if I have to get estimates and stuff like that? So I usually do them about 2 days apart. What I do not like as a listing agent, I think thankfully a lot of smart agents are catching on to this. Stop putting just inspection termination. That is such garbage. In fact, one of my members of my team came to me and said, hey, I was talking to an agent I know, and they said, I just do inspection termination because it looks good. And then when I say, hey, we're gonna have to terminate because the roof is bad, this, that, and the other, most of the times at that point, the other side will say, well, what if we fixed it? So you start negotiating, which you don't have the power to do, right? You don't have the inspection objection. You don't have the inspection resolution when you're terminating. So guys, if you're gonna terminate, just terminate. Don't be in bad faith. Like, well, we're gonna terminate unless you do ABC. But that's not right, in my opinion. It's definitely unethical. And I can tell you, I've had most sellers, though, the unfortunate thing, that agent that said that advice is right. They're like, well, we've already packed our shit, or we've already found the next house, so let's just do it for them. But I can tell you, I had a seller that got really pissed off about it. So they said they weren't going to do anything. They're going to buy it as is or walk away. And that agent even sent me an inspection objection form, which she didn't have the right to do because she only had inspection termination in there. We kept earnest money on that deal for bad faith. So it's up to y'all, but I can tell you, if I have the other agent, and I can tell you this, I love to say this to agents on the phone. You know, they'll like say, well, Will, I know we don't have inspection termination, but we want this, that, and the other. I love to say, you know what? We're in a one-party state. They're like, what do you mean by that? Well, only one party has to know that this call is being recorded, and I know it is. You're now entering into bad faith. You want this played in mediation. So why don't we get reasonable right now? And that freaks them out. So when you have that person doing that on an ethical thing, you can tell them, hey, we're in a one-party state. They'll say, what do you mean? Say, just so you know, only one party has to know that this call is being recorded. Are you guys going to do the unethical, wrong thing to do, the bad faith thing, or are you guys going to do the right thing? So just so you guys know, I don't record all my phone calls. I just say that and they believe it. It's a bluff, but it works. So that's the whole thing about inspection, termination, and objection. Now, my issue's always been this. I have this objection on a Thursday and I have resolution on Tuesday. First off, don't do that. Put objection on Wednesday and resolution on Friday. Because you know what no one wants? No one wants to work over the weekend and negotiate. Well, that's one thing. The other thing is sellers don't want to lose a weekend of being on the market. Third thing is buyers don't want to miss out on the new houses for the weekend. So either get your stuff resolved by the end of the day on Friday or move on. Everyone can go back to their lives, right? So I like to have resolution on a Friday. I think as a buyer's agent, it looks good. You're like, hey guys, if we can't resolve, you all get your weekend back, and so do we. But if you screwed up and you put resolution on a Tuesday or an objection on a Thursday and resolution on Tuesday, you all get to Friday afternoon and the seller's like, I'm not doing any of that stuff. You guys are crazy. And the buyer's like, well, if they don't do all that stuff, I'm not buying the house. That's crazy. Y'all are at this place where it's not going to happen. You do not need to wait for resolution to happen. You don't have to do that. All you have to do is send over an earnest money release and say, hey, y'all, we all know this is going to die on Tuesday. Why don't y'all go back on market and let us go shopping this weekend? And on Tuesday, we're going to get the earnest money back because we're the buyers. It's automatic. It's just done, you know? So why don't we just do the right thing and release each other right now? So you can do that. You can kill the deal with an earnest money release. No notice to terminate is needed. Chance. Hold on. What do you mean by that? The agent's being difficult. Then you have to, in good faith, push till Tuesday. That's why I don't do objection on a Thursday and resolution to a Tuesday, because then my buyer that weekend, they can't go to open houses. They can't go shopping, because if so, they're in bad faith. So if you're like, well, I know it's going to die on Tuesday, but if they talk to you Tuesday morning, they say, you know, Jewel say, they will do it all. They had to change their heart over the weekend. They're like, well, my buyer doesn't want to do it anymore. Like, what do you mean they don't want to do it anymore? Well, I mean, over the weekend, they went to an open house. Now they're under contract in another house. They say, oh, cool, Jewel say, we're keeping earnest money. You guys were in bad faith. So, Chance, I think you had something. No. So the question is, if I get the I find all this stuff, is that the objection? I mean, my inspection reports can be 50 pages long. I'm not putting all 50 pages into an objection. I'm putting the things that really matter. I'm not putting the concrete driveway that has, you know, a slight small crack in it. That's not going in there, guys. We are in a seller's market, right? It's only going to be the reasonable health and safety issues. I'm not going to put, you know, the sink that barely drips in there, right? It just depends on what it looks like. But there is no days in there. There are a lot of states where it's this amount of days for this and that. We actually, our contract, you can put whatever the hell you want. So you could have an objection and resolution 2 days apart, 5 days apart, 5 years apart. If you had a really long contract, whatever you want. You know, the other side might not take it. I usually keep them about 2 days apart. Now it's either object or terminate. So once you object, you lose the right to terminate. Once you terminate, you lose the right to object. So it's either like, oh my God, this house is so bad. We don't even want to try to negotiate. It's got mold and foundation and everything, right? Not till resolution deadline at 11:59 p.m. Now, if you get to that point where we can't negotiate, like each side is firm and they won't give any, seller won't give anything, buyer won't give anything, and you have maybe 2 more days till resolution, you can kill the deal by everyone signing an earnest money release, which the money should go to the buyer at that point. Is there any, Kenny, what do you got? I think, yeah, so the question is, since inspection, termination, and objection, you can go one or the other. I think if you use them, you should put both of them in there 100%. Oh, put both in on the same date. That was your question, Brenda? I don't ever put inspection termination. You know why? I think my job is to negotiate. And I'm not just gonna say we quit. I'm not a quitter. We're gonna push through and we're gonna push hard. If we don't get there, we hit that place we can't get around, we're just gonna go ahead and send an earnest money release. But I believe in negotiating. I believe that's our job. I don't ever let the deal die in my court. That's just how I do it. But I don't. I think it's it's not a good deadline. You could have termination in there for that. But I mean, I tell my client, I go, look, if they're willing to give you 100 grand, would you do it or whatever that looks like? I don't know. What do you mean, Monica? Oh, my clients always do inspections. I can tell you this, Monica, I'm not gonna be one of those agents sued a year or two from now for some of these awful offers we're seeing. I prefer my client to lose out on the house than to sue me in a year because of God knows what. I mean, I've had people call me like, you know, like, hey, how do we make earnest money go hard on day one and have no deadlines in the contract? I'm like, are you insane? All my contracts have all the deadlines. And you guys just, you know, I personally sold 25 houses last year. And I did, out of those 25, I think that 10 were buy sides. So I play in the same pool you guys play in. And my deals get accepted. So. Any other inspection questions? No? Cool. All right, guys, section 10.6, this one changed too. It's really fun. All right, so one, if there's occupancy agreements, leases or anything, list them out right here, right? So that's all in there. And that's ones that survive closing. If we're closing on March 1st, but the lease ends on February 28th, who cares, right? Now, here's the big change. 10.6 and 10.6.1.2 and 10.6.1.3. Now, if you guys remember earlier on in the contract, we said that there's solar panels and they're leased or there's a loan/encumberment on them, right? Well, now we're going to address that issue 8 sections later. Thank you, Dora. I don't get why they did that. So let's just say that you find out that the lease every month for the solar panels is $5,000 a month, right? Something absurd. Well, your buyer's going to pull out. That's why you have the due diligence deadlines in there, right? So if you have your due diligence deadlines blank and there's solar panels, you can't just walk away. So make sure that you have your due diligence deadlines in there, especially with solar panels. What do you got, Brian? So Brian's statement is very good and very fair. If I have to overtake a lease or a loan, can I still afford the house? Maybe, maybe not. So check with the lender, because you know when they're like, man, that DTI is so tight, they got like 1 penny to spare, but now they have the obligation of, I'm sure it is, me too, man, I live on the edge. So they have the obligation of having to pay a $40 a month lease to Solar City or Tesla or whatever they're called. They may not be able to take on that issue. So Brian's right. If you are taking on any monthly payment, make sure that it's good with the lender. What do you got, Kenny? So Kenny's bringing up an issue. I've had the same issue. We actually had to pull a wife off of a loan, and only the husband could do it. So solar panel, you know, it's harder to buy or to lease solar panels than it is to buy a house. You can have a lower credit score with solar panel lease than buying a house. I know that's crazy to me. But I had that happen a long time ago with the Hiltons. And so guys, make sure that if your client's credit score is atrocious, that you're not assuming a solar panel. Now, some of the companies though, Kenny, now will do a deposit, not all, but they'll take a deposit instead. So before you just say, well, we can't even go for it, you're at a 620 credit score, see if they'll do a deposit. Some do, but I've had a deal almost blow up because of it. Yeah, it's weird. I would be like, oh, you're approved for a house? Of course you can lease solar panels. Like, but no, not always. So make sure you're aware of that. The things that I want to know with solar panels, guys, is what's my monthly payment, right? So let's just say the payment's $40 a month. That's cool. Then the next thing is my power bill offset by $40 a month? Does it make sense? Well, if you guys have Excel Energy, which I bet most people in this room have, I was on Excel's website the other day. You know how easy it is to pull the last year of your bills? It's like so easy to pull them off of there. So when I have solar panels or something like that, I actually go down here to this section and I put the last 12 months of solar or Excel Energy bills. Because I want to see, does it make financial sense to assume a loan on these panels or not, right? So that's where I will put solar panels in there. And I can tell you, I was on the broker hotline on Saturday and Megan Kemp called and we put that in there. And she got all the solar panel done stuff. She calls me on Sunday. She said, Will, I got the deal because I was the only one that wrote it right. So make sure you're writing it right because that's where you win deals. Now, what I want to go to in 10.6.1.2 and 10.6.1.3 are these boxes that say will and will not, right? They each have that. So imagine that I'm getting solar panels and I check the box that says I will. If they're leased or encumbered, that's saying that I will assume the obligations of the lease or the income or the debt, right? Depending if it's an encumberment or a lease. So keep that in mind. Now, if neither box is checked, there's no default. Parts of our contracts default, and I'll say, if neither box is checked, it's this. That does not exist here. Damien's answer was, sorry, we messed up. We'll fix it in 3 years. So wait in 3 years, they'll put a default into there. But imagine if I put that, we will not assume the obligations of that lease or loan. If you're the listing agent, you don't know what's going on, so you don't see that. You get to closing, you close it all out. And then a month later, your seller calls you, you say, hey, how's it going? You're like, you guys want to buy a new house yet? They're like, no, we just got a bill from the solar company. We're still being billed for this. I thought that they got the panels. What happened? Well, if will not is checked in there, that debt, those obligations are going to stay with the seller. How happy is your seller going to be if it's like a $19,000 loan or something on solar panels and they get to go pay it for the next 10 years? Yeah, they're going to leave you a really good review somewhere, right? Maybe a lawsuit too. So be very mindful of this section because it has huge implications. Yeah. So that's a very good point, Monica. So if the seller, because a lot of times with loans, it's actually quite hard to assume it. The leases are much easier to assume. So if it says like, in broker confidential information, it says seller will pay off loan before closing or something like that, you would put, will not. And as a listing agent, you see that, you're like, cool, that's what we're planning on. But if you put will and you're playing the other way, buyer's agent, you just gave all this debt to your buyer, which maybe they can handle, maybe they can't. So yeah, it just depends. So that's a very tricky thing. And keep in mind, it's 8 sections away from where we put them into the contract at first. I don't know why they did it. Why I do it, due diligence stuff. Now, guys, see this huge paragraph I have in here? It's a lot of words, right? But the ones that really matter to me are the ones that say, if in their possession, right? So a lot of people use these blanket statements. I use them a lot too. But keep in mind, if something's actually important to my client, it states in there, if they have it, right? They don't have to go get any of this stuff. And who's to say, like, maybe they have it all, but maybe they're like looking at all these instructional brochures and like, I don't want to scan all this. And they just go, well, oh, here's a trash. I no longer have it, right? So this is okay. Most of this stuff already in here, like in mine, they already have to turn this stuff over anyway if they have it. So I put it in. I don't think you have to, but keep that in mind. If there's something they really want, like when it comes to solar panels, I pull this out and I put the power bills into there because that's something they actually really want. So that's a clause that I made up or ripped off. I don't know. I do a lot of R&D, right? Rip off and duplicate. Now, guys, I see this all the time in Source of Water that they do know they do acknowledge receipt. I don't hardly ever have a copy of the seller's property disclosure or Source of Water addendum prior to going under contract. So that's almost always going to be does not. The only time you're going to put does, keep in mind when you're looking at MLS under the lovely photo of the house, there's sometimes this little thing that looks like 3 pieces of paper. That's called supplements. If the listing agent or probably their assistant took the time to put Source of Water or seller's property disclosure into there, what you need to do to be the best agent and get your offer accepted is download that supplement, add a signature line for your buyer to it, have them sign it, and then you can say they do acknowledge receipt because they've gotten it. Because I can tell you, if I'm going to take the time to put something into supplements and you're not aware of it, you're going to be ticked off. You're going to be like, wait, I put all that stuff into there and you got questions? Come on now, right? So that's the only time. Now, there is no well. I don't know why people ever check that box unless it's like a condo or a townhome, because I sold a house in Lakewood. We found out like 5 days before closing, there was a well in the backyard. I sold a house in Thornton, and the Thornton house, yeah. No, but like we found out there was a well like 5 days before closing, and it was fine. My client loved it. It was the agricultural well, so he uses it just to do his lawn. But then I had another house. It wasn't my buy side. It was someone on my team. But I went to final walkthrough with them, and I'm in the backyard with the buyer. I'm like, the hell's that over there? It's like this weird metal looking thing. I go over, it's a wellhead, right? So there are wells where you wouldn't expect them. So you might be like, single family house. We're not in the country. There is no well. You don't know that. So I leave it blank. Condos and townhomes, I won't. And also newer developments, I won't either. Like I can tell you, Aurora Highlands, there's no wells in those properties, right? Anything newer is not going to have it. But if it was built before 90, they can have surprising wells that you're not aware of. Going on down. You guys keep this in mind, lead-based paint deadline, right? That deadline for us, it's a big one. It's not just the listing agent and the seller that has to sign it. You actually have to sign it by that date too. Your buyer doesn't, but you do. So I've been told that, hey, Will, we're out of contract. We had to amend because I hadn't signed the lead-based paint before the lead-based paint deadline. Carbon monoxide detectors, just so y'all know, those need to be in before any showings happen. Like any showings, it's very clear. Now, if there's no furnace, no combustible, gas and stuff in there, whatever, right? But I think most houses have, unless they are like an electric furnace, which doesn't exist a whole lot, right? Yeah, because boiler has gas. And then the water heater probably has gas too, right? But if you, I have a house in Mississippi, there's no gas to that house. There ain't no carbon monoxide issues there, right? So it just depends. If most houses in Colorado have gas going to them. Here's why it's so important before showings, and it's in the listing contract. It's not like this is something that I just think is important. Imagine I'm out there, I'm taking this young family with me. The house is vacant, right? We go on in, walking around, start getting really tired, we fall over, we die. That's what carbon monoxide does to you guys. I've heard it's actually quite a lovely way to go, but I'll just tell you, there's gonna be people in the house, and if no one's living there, yeah, methamphetamine. So guys, you might not realize this. Meth gets found in the weirdest places. You know where it usually gets found? Soil? It's in furnace ducts. That's right where it is. Or even very, very commonplace. Those vents in bathrooms? There, you know why? The kids in the bathroom smoking meth and blowing it through the vent. right? So I can tell you, like, you might be like, this is a nice house. This is not in the ghetto. There'd be no meth here. There may be, there may not be. Whether you encourage your clients to test for it, that's up to you. But yeah, meth can happen in the funniest places. Now, if your house has been completely remediated against meth, you know what? You don't have to do anything, right? It says in here that you don't have to disclose it. So this is right there, right? No disclosure required. Now, I've had a house that we were about to close, and my client sends me this YouTube video. I'm like, what are they sending me, right? And it's literally Adams County sheriffs busting into the house, doing a raid on the house that we're about to close on. I'm like, oh God. And we had to do some digging, but they ended up buying it. But the internet has all sorts of stuff. And I don't know if your buyers ever do this. My buyers like to do this. You go to the neighbors, they're like, so tell me all about the house. And that's when the neighbors say it all. So, you know, whether you disclose or not, that's up to you and your client. But I'll just tell you all, like, why not? Because it's going to come out somewhere. And you don't want them to find some deadline to pull out on. Maybe they just walk away from their earnest money, right? Who knows? Closing instructions, guys. I don't see those hardly ever executed at time of contract. So the answers are not is usually what you should put there. Again, if it's in supplements, download it, put your buyer's name on it, you know, and execute them, right? For closing date and time, I put closing company, right? That's a title company. Because the title company is not going to put me into bad faith or out of contract. What I mean by that is if I put listing agent there and the listing agent says, well, we're going to close at 9 a.m. on Friday. My guy works maybe, you know, at Coors and he works overnight and he's not done till like 9. He can't be at a 9 o'clock closing. We are now out of contract because we cannot perform at 9 a.m. Now, obviously you get to take a day off or whatever, but we could not perform. Most sellers are going to say, I'm okay if you sign 3 hours later. I don't care. I just want to get it done. But who knows? What if they have a backup offer behind you for 50K higher, right? So time of day and the place of closing companies are going to say, whatever works for you, because we want your business on the next one, right? So they will work with you. So I like that. I hate mutual agreement because if we have a really nasty inspection issue or something like that, we may not be able to mutually agree on things. So I go with closing company, go with what you want on that. Different types of deeds. We really see 3 different types, right? At most. Has anyone here ever done bargain and sale and or done a quick claim that was not for like a family friend member? Exactly. We don't do those. I'm not even totally sure what bargain and sale is. I'd have to look it up. Special warranty, you're going to mostly see it with flippers and builders. You'll see it there a lot. They think it does provide them with some protection. There are sellers now that have caught on that they believe they have more protection. The reality is special warranty and general warranty, if you get title insurance, will provide you the same protection. So it's not a big deal. Personal representative deed, you have an estate sale. Doesn't mean someone died. I had a lady that had dementia and she had a personal representative, right? But if there's a personal representative deed is there. Now, if you're a good listing agent, you're going to say in confidential information, or you'll have it loaded into CTM, who the signer is and all those different pieces, right? If you're not a good agent, they're going to see personal representative's deed and say, well, I need to call them and bother them on Sunday while they're having fun watching football or whatever, and ask them who to rake it out to. So if you do a PR deed, make sure you know how it should be titled and whatnot. Put it out there so they don't have to call you. Guys, closing service fee and all these fees. Closing service fee is about $400, depending on the title company. Again, 1/2 buyer seller. It just depends on what that looks like. All these HOA fees. Hopefully the listing agent's awesome and knows what they are and can tell you what they are so that you know how to negotiate, right? Because you could have a status letter that's not that high, but then we do a private transfer fee. I've seen those. Or the one I love is working capital, right? Working capital can be a big one. Like I have a new build. My working capital is 2 months of HOA, right? But you have no idea. Like Green Valley Ranch, don't they have a transfer fee of like 0.5%? A lot of places in Green Valley Ranch, I think they do. I know I've done it there before. So if you're the listing agent, let them know. We don't really see a lot of local transfer or sales use tax where we are, or private transfer, but they can't exist. If you know about it, let it disclose. Water transfer fees. I've had a water transfer fee in Lakewood of $100. I mean, it just depends on what it looks like. So know where you're practicing. Utility transfer. Has anyone had one? The only case I have heard of yet is Durango. So those don't exist here, guys, but I can tell you, I wouldn't be surprised if one day Excel is like, wait, we start charging a transfer fee of $200. Why wouldn't they, right? So I'm surprised they're not, but that's probably coming down the pipe. I already know what happens in Durango. FIRPTA. Y'all, if your seller is subject to FIRPTA, how do you know? I love to go to my listing appointment. I say, are you a US citizen? I don't care what they look like or where they, or anything else, what their name is or anything. I ask every seller that. And they say no. I said, well, you may be subject to FIRPTA. Let's talk to the title company now. And that way we're prepared. The last thing you want to do is, get a hold of that last minute. FIRPTA can lead to 15% of the purchase price being withheld at closing. Yeah.
When you pay taxes, so then
Well, and that's the thing is if you get ahead of it too, and they are subject to it, you can get documentation from the IRS showing that you're up to date, and then they don't have to withhold the money. But imagine if your seller is selling $1 million house, but they only have 100,000 in equity for whatever reason. If they have to collect 15%, that seller can't sell without bringing 50,000 to the table, right? Or imagine if they're going to try to take all their equity and move it to, wherever they're going to France, they're going to go buy an estate there. And they're like, wait, they're going to hold 15% now? I can't buy it anymore. They're not going to be happy with you, right? So, bless you. So make sure that you guys are aware of FIRPTA. And if it does apply, put it into the contract, because if you get a contract like this and it's blank and FIRPTA does apply, well, you need to counter it, right? Colorado withholding, same thing. If your clients, what do you mean? So here's how it works. If the seller, no one asks them about FIRPTA. No one does. Now I can tell you, if you ever go to a closing, they almost always say, there's a document, an affidavit they signed, the seller saying whether they are or not subject to FIRPTA. But imagine you went to ABC Title Company, they weren't very good and they didn't have that in their stack of stuff. If the seller then leaves the country, that financial responsibility now goes to the buyer. But no, so if the seller leaves and they owe money, they come after the buyer of the house. So that's where it does matter. So that's where, you want to make sure you work with a reputable title company, asking that question so that your buyer can say, hey, look, this is what we know, because this is the affidavit they signed, right? Colorado withholding, if your sellers are leaving the state of Colorado, they may withhold, I think it's 2%. So that could be a lot of money, right? So if they're leaving, talk to the title company, see if you can get tax certifications, other things like that, so their monies don't have to be held. But if you don't know what your seller is doing because you did a really piss poor listing appointment, then you're not going to know whether or not money, they're leaving, and you should get ahead of the curveball on this. Yeah, if they're leaving the state, Colorado withholding may apply. So if you look at it, exactly. So they're just making sure that the money is there, dual safe. So if you have back taxes, that it's much easier to have the money and take it from there. But if you go to Michigan, it's harder for Colorado to come after you, right? So they're going to hold it. However, title companies don't have to hold the money if they can get tax certifications, other things showing that you're up to date. Yeah. Yeah. Talk to title up front about it. Don't wait till like the day of closing, because at closing, they fill out a document and title has had no time to prepare. They're withholding the money. Yeah. You made the mistake one time, right? There you go. So you guys, tax prorations, here's how I look at it. If the market's going up, which for the foreseeable future it is, you want to go with most recent mill levy, because the mill levy will keep going up and it'll put more money on the table. Now, if the market's going down, which who knows, maybe that's in the near future. If it goes down, I switch to taxes for the calendar year immediately preceding, because if the taxes are higher and the new mill levy is going to bring down the proration or the amount of money we're going to get, hopefully there's enough money on the table. So most recent mill levy, if it's going up, taxes calendar year preceding, if it's going down. I don't know if that'll ever happen or not. We'll see. Going on down, guys, association assessments. I generally check that the seller is going to pay those through closing. I've been countered on that though. Just think about this. If they're going to go replace the entire parking lot, new paving, I don't know, maybe the buyer should pay for it because they're the ones that are going to enjoy the new paved parking lot. I generally put seller, it generally squeaks through. It's up to you how you run your business. Possession, guys, make it hurt. if I'm gonna have to come to get this money from you, I'm gonna have to sue you. And think about it this way: if I put $50 a day, right, and the seller's like, it's $50 a day, my new build just got delayed 5 days. For $250, I can stay in my house until my new build's done. I'm not moving out then, right? I'm not gonna take my dog and my kids and my wife and put all my shit in the storage for 5 days when I could stay here for 50. But 500 a day, I might say I need to get out, right? And go get a hotel and all that. So make sure it's enough to spank them. I'll tell you this too, is make sure that with it, if their level of life, you know, quality of life is higher, are they going to stay in the Howard Johnson or are they going to stay in the Four Seasons, right? So whatever their life looks like, you've been in their house, make sure it's enough for that life, right? I mean, seriously, you want to go, you know, you're selling Peyton Manning's house. You're like, hey, Peyton, don't worry, there's $20 a day. You can go stay in the Hojo. Peyton's going to be pissed. You ain't getting no more referrals from him. You guys, if your buyer's buying as an investment, they don't plan to live there, check that box. If you're doing a post occupancy, you need to check that box. Post occupancy too, execute it at time of contract, send it over with the offer. Because if you're going to ask for rent or security deposit or anything like that, you want to make sure that's agreed to up front, because after inspection, if you're like, oh, and also I want $100 a day rent, they're like, no, we hate you. We're not giving you that, right? So be careful. You guys, if something happens to the house, call. Yep. Yes. Why do I have it there? I don't know why that's in there. I don't mean to have that in there. But it's a special province. And I don't know if there's anything weird that they knew, you know, but I've never had and had to add anything. I usually put at least 500. No. I don't know, about probably 1,000. But I can tell you, like right now, like a hotel is going to be at least $150. They gotta keep the U-Haul an extra day. You know what I mean? Like money adds up so fast. And then not if I'm living in a hotel, I'm probably now going out to eat dinner because I don't have my kitchen. Food's got more, you know what I mean? It just starts adding up. My dog's in now overnight stays or whatever. I mean, it just $500 ain't that much money, guys.
I have a question.
Hold on, Zoom. Yeah. Court. Now I can tell you, it's not always court. So the question was, how do you get that money? The answer is basically court. I had a seller that did move out of the house by about 5 hours. And the buyer was like super pissed, even though they weren't even moving in that day. It was like the stupidest thing. We ended up in mediation and they gave like $200. So before court, we tried mediation and they're like, look, $200 to shut you up. And they're like, fine. It was like, but the funny thing is the buyer actually paid $300 to be at mediation. So it was like so stupid. But yeah, make it hurt. And yeah, it's court is where you're going. All right, guys, cause of loss. So this talks about a lot of stuff, like what happens if the house gets damaged or anything like that. Now keep this in mind, stuff breaks.
I have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, what was the Zoom question? Sorry about that.
I think there's
Huh?
I think there's two Zoom questions.
Go for it. Let's take one and then the other.
So on a
The agreement, it's pretend it's 60 days, possession, 60 days.
Wait, I'm sorry. Say it again.
And the dates and deadlines. Possession 60 days later, correct?
And dates and deadlines, yeah, you can take possession 60 days later. I mean, you can take it later than that even. You can
So-
take it 2 years later,
so-
5 years later. Now, most loans are going to require that you take possession of the house within 60 days.
Okay, and then
The question is,
and then
guys,
do you have
can we put 60 days in possession? It's like, you can put whatever you want in possession.
okay? Do you have to have like a whole second to switch keys and everything when you do that?
You have to have a what?
Like a sit down
where
meeting,
possession
happens,
when they
exchange keys and everything.
So you guys, the question is, do you have to have like a meeting for a possession date? I can tell you, here's how I usually do it. I say, hey, my lockbox is on the door. As soon as my seller's out, I'll text the combo to you, and that's it. It's how you want to do it. I mean, I've had where people walk through together, we see damage. I mean, it's however you want to do it. I hate post occupancy. It's sticky and it's not fun. But, you know, the house should be in the same condition as closing. You can do a walkthrough, you can do it however you want. I usually have the lockbox there. I have post occupancy on a house I'm closing on Monday, and on Saturday we get possession. My client's out of state. Since they're out of state, I am going to meet the seller there and do a quick walkthrough. It's however you want to do it. There's no right or wrong of how to switch possession. I mean, you guys could all have a powwow. It could be just the buyer and seller. It could be whatever. Does that answer your question?
Yes, awesome.
Yes,
Cool.
awesome, thank you.
So you guys, if something breaks, I love it when a furnace breaks and I'm on the buy side, because you know what that means, my buyer's getting a brand new furnace before closing, right? So if your refrigerator breaks, so you can't say, I'm gonna go to Craigslist, right? Unless it was a Craigslist refrigerator. It has to be as good or better. So it talks about that in here. It also talks about, you know, if something gets really bad, word condemnation.
All
Hopefully
right,
that doesn't happen.
I had a question.
Hold on a second for a quick second. So condemnation, I guarantee you, out of the 1,000 houses we lost in the Marshall fire, at least one of those was under contract, at least one. So what happens in 18.3, that did just happen to at least one house. If you think about it, Boulder County a month ago. What was your question?
There was a question that came up at an ECU about occupancy. The seller never signed it. The contract was signed, and then they wanted to read closing. If that was never signed, does that mean the contract would have been dead at that point, or?
Well, so the question is, if buyer sends over an offer with a post occupancy agreement, and the seller never signs the post occupancy agreement, you get to closing, is it open for negotiation? I would contend 100%, right? Because we haven't all signed it. What? Well, no. Well, possession is not negotiable, but the terms of the post occupancy agreement are negotiable. No. So you'd say possession, you know, is 5 days after closing. Post occupancy goes for 5 days after closing. But is there rent? Is there a security deposit? Does the seller have to have a renter's policy on the house, right? All those things. That'd be all open to negotiation. Possession wouldn't, though, I don't think. Yeah. I mean, there really isn't, you know, I mean, there's a thing that you check in the contract saying that we agree to do one. So you have to do one before closings. You agree to that, but the terms you can't. So, I mean, you could write into additional provisions that this offer is subject to seller accepting post occupancy agreement. Now, there's also other deadlines in the contract. I mean, I can tell you this, if I get to inspection objection and my client really wants all this rent and all this other stuff, maybe that's where we pull out. Maybe it's insurance. There's other ways out of the contract that are somewhat subjective, right? But I can tell you, I pre-negotiate that with the other agent. And I can tell you in this market, I'm not asking for rent. I'm not asking for deposits. I'm pretty much just getting down and saying, please take our offer. Right? Is that what you have to do? But it stinks, right? Because it's like everyone feels unprotected. No one loves it. But there's going to be nothing fair about buying a house this year. It's going to hurt. The fair thing is you got it at a lower interest rate. Final walkthrough verification. You guys always do a final walkthrough. I had a house once, I was on the listing side, and day of closing, there was a vacant house, the basement flooded. How would you know if you didn't do a final walkthrough, right? You know, this is where it talks about legal counsel, time is of the essence. Like, we're not supposed to screw around, right? Like, we have to get the appraisal ordered, stuff like that, because time is of the essence. Yeah, specific performance is a big deal. If you check this box, what it's saying is, not only do you get my buyer's earnest money if my buyer doesn't perform, but you can sue them for a lot of other damages too. So if you do check this box, one, I'd let the listing agent know my buyer loves the house so much, they're willing to expose themselves to all this risk. And two, if you do it, make sure your buyer understands it's not just the X amount of earnest money. It could go much higher than that. So be very careful with that box. And if you choose to use it, make sure that the other side understands that you're doing it. Going on down, guys, we got a mediation before court. That is what it is. Mediation is not fun. All they're going to do is cut the baby in half in general. If there's earnest money disputes, this talks about how we get it resolved. Termination talks about if you have the right, what it would look like. Now keep this in mind, section 25 has kind of changed a little bit. So if something happens, like an inspection item is not completed before closing, it does survive the contract. It didn't used to. But if it's an inspection item is not done before closing and there's a loan, you need to let the lender know because the lender may not close at that point. I'd say just get your stuff done. If you have a lot of inspection issues, don't wait until the day of closing to go to the agent and say, hey, can I get the receipts? Be sending them emails all the time. Hey, did you get that roof done? I would love the receipt. Did you get this done? We'd love the receipt. Having your inspection resolution that all items will be done, 3 days prior to closing or something like that. You do not want to get to the day of closing and be like, crap, they haven't done anything, right? Like that's a bad place to be. You guys, here's the different ways that you can communicate, right? I don't know why, but some people put in here CTM. Well, CTM is a thing called email actually, right? Or they put internet, which I don't know what the internet means. Does that mean I can slide into your DMs with some electronic notice? I don't know. So I'll leave it blank because I don't know what internet means. And I think that we have fax, email, and then physical delivery. I think that's enough types of delivery. So that's the contract. I want to point out this in additional provisions, guys. If they're not offering 2.8% or whatever you expect to get paid, if your buyer's agency agreement does not say in section 7.3 that the buyer is obligated to pay, you do not have the right to ask for more commission. Because the only time you have a right to ask is if it says in your buyer's agency that I'll get 2.8% or whatever that is, and that buyer, seller and listing brokerage firm may pay buyer is obligated. Because is it in your buyer's best interest to write your commission in there? No, it hurts the net to the seller.
Because they lowered the price by 90, and then we said we would pay full price if they paid like full commission. They were only 1%.
And I understand that, but the problem with that, so someone said that she does that, and the seller still nets the same thing because they just raise the price. Here's the problem I have with that. If I'm on the listing side, what if we don't appraise because you push the price up even more? You push the price up 2% more. What if we don't appraise now? So I don't think it helps your client anyway. However, you do have the right, in my opinion, if in section 7 you say, here's my percentage of buyers obligated to pay. So you go to your buyer and say, hey, they're offering 1%. You're going to have to pay me the extra 1.8%, which is whatever, $7,500 at closing, or I can write it into the contract. So I'm hoping that you're putting in your buyer agency, you get paid X% and buyer is obligated to pay. Otherwise, that'd be unethical and illegal. And it needs to be in additional provisions because y'all look at this. After they sign, that is the end of the contract. Where we sign is not part of the contract. We don't even need to sign the contract. Compliance will make you, but we don't need to. So when I see it down here, I've seen many times that they'll say other and I get paid X%. Because I'm going to tell you all this. I don't do 2.8 every time. I do 2.5 sometimes. Hate me, I don't care. But it is what it is. So I have the other and they put in their 2.8%. We can give it to them. We have no legal requirement to. So anyone that's putting commission down in this section, which is not a part of the contract, they can put in there, they get whatever they want. I recommend telling them early on, just so you know, you put that in the wrong part of the contract. You're only getting paid whatever, 2.5%. However, you can also let them find out when they see the settlement statement at the very end. If you guys have any contract questions, it's in the buyer agency. I mean, if your buyer agency doesn't say you get paid X% and buyer is obligated to pay, you don't have the right, in my opinion, to ask for more commission because how does that help the buyer? This is not about you. This is about the buyer and the seller. Well, you know what I mean? That's where it could be an issue doing it that approach. So it's up to y'all. So awesome, guys. Well, I hope that was helpful. You guys are always welcome to reach out to me. The seller won't be early next month. I don't know what day yet. I got to talk to Cheryl. Here's my cell phone, guys. If y'all know anyone looking to join a team, I'm heavily interviewing right now. I'm trying to grow my team into another location. Feel free to reach out to me anytime if you guys know anyone. Yeah. The what? The bright yellow? Hell yeah. Y'all have a good day. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Will.
Anytime, Zoomers. Have a good day.